Hello, everyone. This is another Freedom to Feel conversation, and my guest today is Lindsey Kluin. She is an intuitive healer, a certified mindfulness guide, and mentor. She is a former tech professional, former professional mountain bike racer, wife, mother, comedy, I love that, and nature lover. What's not to love about that? There's something in your bio that you said that really caught my attention. This is the brief bio for Lindsay. The full bio will be at the end. You said while she has no desire to race these days, time on trails in any form is forever sacred. So that really caught my attention, especially the concept of the word sacred. And I have to ask you, what is your let's say, what is your description, your mental description of the sacred?
Yeah, well, thank you. And it's such an honor to be here. So thank you for having me. Yeah, the sacred. I think being on trails and being out in nature, especially with my kids and my husband, is something where I just feel like I can get into that flow, that sense of not needing to think and plan and anticipate. I get to just be where I am. And I really did find that in certain ways as a bike racer way back in the day, but not needing to race now, getting to just enjoy whether we're hiking or walking or picnicking or riding our bikes. My kids are mountain bikers, so it is very fun for me that they enjoy it, and I hope they continue to. But really, no matter what we're doing, I feel like I can touch into that space that's more timeless and more attuned to what is. And the natural world has really always been my primary teacher in that way.
How can we bring this into our day-to-day lives, this timeless, this infinite nature of being, which is really what we are?
Yeah.
How can we bring this into the whole with all the personality and and the complexity of being human?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's such a challenge, right? Especially as working professionals, and we're, husbands or wives, and we have kids, and there's just so much that we need to do. And so it's very easy to fall into a space of just like living in the thoughts that are always either remembering the past, anticipating the future, maybe fantasizing about the future, what we want or need. And I think for me, and really why now I've dedicated my professional sphere after a long time to this work full time. I love the challenge really of bringing this more mindful, aware state to the busyness and the chaos, right? And not like I don't have time to sit and meditate all day, every day. I essentially feel like I get to meditate when I'm working with my clients, which is really fantastic. But even when I'm, managing the household and the kids and doing these things, what I've learned what to do and what really feeds me, replenishes me, you could say, is noticing what my attention is on, which is the same thing that for a sitting meditation, a more classic kind of way we think about meditation, the muscle that strengthens is the awareness of what am I up to? Am I falling into the mind? Am I resisting? Am I holding on to? Am I wanting for? And so just bringing that muscle that we can really build in a more classic meditation to our day to day, and having this really deep, honest commitment to saying, you know what, that matters most, right? Because we show up like the love we have for our loved ones is always the most powerful form of love and connection. And what enables us to really show up for them is that attunement to something other than the mind that's always not in the present moment. And so letting the mind be there, I like to say minds are going to mind, thoughts are going to thought, but we don't have to be asleep in that. We can also notice, simultaneously, that more of our attention can be on the ineffable, the space of peace or consciousness, we could call it, that's kind of birthing the thoughts, you could say. And so that sounds kind of I guess it's so ineffable that it's hard to nail down. So it really is a practice of kind of learning how to do that and committing to that really deeply. And then noticing that, especially the moments of challenge where we definitely don't do that, right? We fall into the worry or the rush. And then we get to just notice, worry, rush. And then we suddenly we're back, right?
One of the things that became very clear to me is that it was not about spiritualizing the person or the mind, the entity that it felt this was, this body mind complex, but being more of the spiritual being, the spiritual me, which is not really a me, it's everywhere. So that has been an interesting unfolding, I would say, to just not try to become a person that's spiritual, but the spirit itself. What would you say to somebody like me if this is my take, if this is my understanding as of this moment, that I don't want to become a, or that's not that I don't want to, it's something that I realize is just not useful to be a spiritual person, but being that presence itself, just focusing, as you said, the attention more to the sacred, which to me translates as seeing everything as sacred.
Well, what would I say to you? I mean, at first I would say what a beautiful articulation of you really exploring this and sharing it. You know, there's a tremendous amount of wisdom, and I can feel your commitment to your practice, you know? And so there's real beauty there, and like taking that pause of just noticing, wow, what a beautiful commitment you have to this, right? Because that I think so much is the practice. Any spiritual practice is kind of being willing to just notice what is and notice what you're truly committed to, you know? I think the challenging thing too is it truly is the thinking, is the orientation of our mind that wants to know, and the conditioned, very habitual momentum behind the very ancient part of our brain that's trying to survive. It's really trying to orient and protect us. And that self-preservation in that part of the brain that you could call the ego or the small self, or we could call it anything, but we know what it is because it fractures us from being here. It pulls us here, you know? And there's a here that can be quite expansive, but it's really the cyclical thinking, doing, wanting, craving, needing, resisting, you know? And so I think one of a powerful kind of technique of catching this is noticing, how often when we get really honest with ourselves, how often our mind is kind of resisting what is. Even the smallest little glimpses of something about this moment should be different. And it's kind of constantly running, you know? And so it's just simply by the act of noticing that that's a very human conditioned tendency, that the antidote to is noticing it and then making a different choice of not kind of fueling that, and instead pulling more attention back to kind of the space around it, right? That is always very comfortable with what is. And that's already here. It's already awake with people. It's just so much of us is pulled into the gravity of the spinning thought that's wanting and trying, you know?
And I think that was almost like it felt like a technique too, or some sort of antidote to to all the business of the mind and whatever traumas I was carrying. That really, really, really worked as a technique again. But going back to what you've been saying, it's not really something that we get to. We're already there. Everything's already. It has been always here. It's not even it's not hidden. Isn't that funny? Because it's not hidden.
And it's actually quite easy once we recognize from a deeper sense of ourself what is, you know, a deeper willingness to fully be right here without getting pulled into the thought's interpretation of the right here, which is never right here. Yeah. And so it's a practice, and it can feel quite challenging. And so people, there's always or often an assumption that it takes so much time. And it's funny because I've realized it really does not need to. You know, there can be joy in it taking time, but it can be quite quick when we recognize what's truly true and what we are most committed to, what we truly want the most, you know, which tends to be some form of freedom, freedom to just be here and enjoy it. and maybe even delight in it, but that delight is always feels kind of far away from the intellect or the thought or this conditioned survival uh, way of orienting, and so it requires a willingness to kind of rest back into just being with what is and observing it to the point where then there's the really deep recognition that it's safe to just be. It's safe to be.
The question that comes to mind for some people who have not understood this or is trying to understand, like go deeper into it, how do we create that safe space around people who are not yet in contact with these, with their own selves? Because that's basically what we are saying, right? That we are divine, we are sacred. So how do we, like in family members, some of us are married or we have we live with our parents, kids. So how do we do that? How to create that safe beingness around them when might not be safe after all,
Yeah.
in a sense, for the body mind.
Right. Yeah. Well, and so the where people would poke holes in what I just said is, but I could get hurt here. There's violence here. There's hate here. That's not safe. And it's like, yeah, that's true. And in this moment with your body, anything could, the walls could be falling down around us. And when we're perfectly present, there is a very inherent safety in the core of us, and that is what I would call the sacred. It's the formless and the timeless finding itself in form and time. And so when we look at this question that you just asked, through the lens of I've been an intuitive healer for about 15 years. I love this work. And it became very clear to me a very long time ago, even before I was doing it professionally, that intuitive healing is not about doing something to another. It's really about inviting out from them that wisdom and that recognition of their whole healed nature that is inherently in safety, and bringing that into the body. And so sometimes that's like you'll notice for me, as a former athlete way back in the day, I was very kind of in my body as an athlete, and I had a lot of opening of awareness as a really little kid. I had very like powerful experiences of just spontaneous opening into just like utter loving connectedness, and it would just happen at times. And so I had all this awareness up here, and I had this sense of like I want to use my body. It was the in between. It was like getting these two parts of myself to like meet. And so when we look at our family and our friends, our loved ones, and these people that we of course want to bring healing to, want to help them feel safe, and whatever it might be, there's sometimes they have more of their awareness open, and it's about kind of helping anchor in. Sometimes they have a lot of body awareness, and it's about helping open up. And how do we do this? It's not by doing something to them or teaching and I'm going to tell you information. That really doesn't work. It might kind of point them to something, but it's really through the inspiration, like inspiring from the inside out by modeling by modeling your light, your recognition of how you are finding this attunement to the sacred while in the chaos of the world, which very clearly for many of us is found in the conflict, right? It's the conflict that kind of teaches us with our loved ones where we fall asleep into that, again, fearful kind of conditioned state of survival where we brace ourselves against what shows up, as opposed to being willing to say, that hurt my feelings when you said that, and feeling comfortable with what comes up in them as you acknowledge a deep truth, and you stay with it. And then and then something opens in them, like, so it's these simple mundane things that really kind of do the healing. And it's where I was meditating the other week, and the phrase "let life lead" dropped in, and I was like, oh, that's exactly what I teach. And I was like, do people have that website? No, they don't. I'm going to buy that domain, because I like the concept of let your life lead. What's showing up, we don't have to brace against. We get to kind of be willing to fully be with what shows up honestly, openly, and stay with it. And that heals us and it heals them. Yeah. Does that make sense?
It does. I love that. Some people are not ready to recognize their divine self. So I'm wondering if this is if we when we find ourselves in relationships that are not, let's say, in alignment with our own, our awakening, as you may call it. So our heart's desire, to be one with the divine. Then is that something that is because they are not ready? In these people are not around us. They are not really open to it. They are not. So I'm wondering if there's some sort of a readiness, timing.
I would say it's not an uncommon question. And, the question moves from a part of us that's really trying to figure out. And there's wisdom there, right? It's a very reasonable thing that we want to know. And so we know that, we see that. And the truth that's in this question, well, there's a lot of truths in it. One is the recognition of you can't strong arm someone into being something they're not, right? We can only be with who and what they are. And the recognition of they're not ready, what I sense in that question, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the maybe like the expression or demonstration of it would be the willingness to be more vulnerable, have more of kind of an open heart, be willing to acknowledge what they don't know or what feels confusing or scary to them. And instead, there's kind of a hard, like, wall that you hit, and it becomes some sort of emotional dysregulation of anger or sadness or something like this. Is that what you mean?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
Yeah, and, I think, a kind of story we could tell that I think can be really helpful, it's like an allegory in a way, is the earth as a classroom, as a spiritual, well, we don't even have to call it spiritual, we can just call it a classroom where we're kind of learning, um, and so there's no wrong way to learn, is there? Right? If we really wanna look at it and we truly recognize that everything is of the divine, as you say, or of the sacred, even the things that, of course, intellectually we would not condone, it's a part of the classroom, you know? And that is where I think it gets very tricky as people really wake up to more of the truths, because there's things that we very intuitively and very, reasonably want to say is wrong. And as long as we're in that state of wanting to make as if one side of the coin is wrong, we will stay asleep in the spin of the coin, you know? We won't be able to fully have a kind of recognition that the world of duality is just a world of duality that's gonna be showing us challenging things, but we don't have to be asleep in that challenge in a way that causes us to feel as if there's something to fix. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't stand up for yourself in a relationship that feels imbalanced, because everything wants to kind of come into balance. And that's where a lot of what I teach, I got into the work just as an energy reader and healer, and I love the intuitive arts. A lot of what I also teach is like boundaries, is earthen boundaries, how no can be a full sentence, full stop, you know? And that boundaries is energetically and physically and everything in between. Boundaries give us the possibility for health and balance in this life, spiritually, physically, and everywhere else, because it doesn't tell another what to do. It tells another what we're willing to do, you know? And there's something so sacred about that, and saying, this is my container. And it's a container for the divine, to really move through. And it's as if we're becoming these expressions of love and form as we truly wake up. And true love doesn't resist what is, it doesn't judge it. It doesn't even fear losing the love. It just loves.
Yes, I have heard of, you probably heard about Maharaj, and he was fully awakened in a sense that it didn't really matter what happened to the body, the mind, whatever people said about him. If he was not right, if he was not correct, politically correct, it didn't really matter. He was already, yeah, he was already there. Acceptance, just
Mhm.
falling into this beautiful, kind of in the arms of acceptance, and just staying there, accepting that the other won't change or won't evolve, but then accepting also that I have a responsibility to, in a situation, it's not a problem, but a situation that I can make a choice, that I can do something about it.
No is absolutely, that's divine love, though. Saying no is absolutely divine love.
I have heard before, and you probably have too, that some people, they find themselves in certain situations because they're needed there. There's something. It's almost like I've heard that way. It was in a funny way that a priest died, and then a student asked, where are you going? And he said, I'm going to hell. And then the student was puzzled and confused. You're an amazing human being. You're divine. And then he said, that's the place that I'm most needed. Why would I go to heaven?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's an either or in that way. Yeah. But I mean, I like what you have so much clarity. You have so much wisdom. And so you don't even need to be asking me these questions. I feel like you could answer them
I love
yourself.
the dance. I can't help it.
Yeah. Well, so when you sit back and think about that question, I guess what makes you ask that question?
That's where I find myself as a body mind complex, like in situations where something in me, if it had a choice, would say, I would be around people like Lindsay, like Darlene. I have a lot of amazing people that I meet there that just I just melt around them. So like, why can my body mind here be around them all the time and just that be it?
I
But
see.
then it does, yeah, that's the reason why I asked the question. I guess the question for the body and mind, they are asking the question, really.
Yeah, okay. Well, so yeah, there's this sense of attunement to certain souls, certain friends, where you just feel like you're my people. There's a vibration and like a frequency that you feel that just feels like, ah. And there's others we could be around where it doesn't feel like that. And there's this invitation in those moments. One of the ways I would speak to this is there's an invitation that says, uh, how willing are we to still hold on to our truest truths, our vibration, our open heart, even in the midst of others who really can't have it and might even have this fear that kind of wants to snuff it out or something. There's a sense of, or at least the kind of survival brain might, and you might sense like, "Ooh, I don't know if this is safe." And so it's the invitation to kind of grow bigger than that and go, "Oh no, I actually am safe. It's okay if they don't understand. It's okay. Let them, the Mel Robbins, let them." Yeah. So many counselors, so many of my friends who do similar work to me, we were like, Mel Robbins, she nailed that phrase. It's absolutely a truth to just, we can let them and still let ourselves, right? Because letting them is really this implicit permission to be fully here with us and not feel even a little bit asleep in the delusion that another outside of us holds the keys to our peace of mind, to our sense of safety in that moment, right? True safety, which has truly nothing to do with the physical body. It has to do with the quality of consciousness or presence that we're resting in, that we're attending to, but putting our attention on. Yeah, you can feel that. You know exactly what that is, don't you?
I have to say that the concept of compassion comes in. I guess that really
Mm,
fills that gap, that longing to be around people like you and soul friends. Yeah.
mhm.
And then compassion comes in and kind of, yeah, and fills that space, the compassion for the other who is suffering. And the suffering, which what I mean by suffering is just not knowing what they are. So that's,
Oh,
I
yeah.
perceive that as it's very painful.
Yeah, it's an asleepness, and it can feel painful to notice asleepness in another. And so that's kind of a phase along the way where there's a necessary grieving of noticing the delusion of separation, where we truly feel convinced, well, I sit here and you sit there, so we must be separate. And yet you and I know, and you could feel how the life moving through me is the same moving through you. Einstein said it too. Einstein really very directly spoke to the illusion of separation. And so did Buddha, so did Christ, really so many teachers teaching in their way, whether it's through a scientific frame or a spiritual frame. They're speaking to the same truth through a different translation layer of recognizing we are essentially consciousness, that we could call divine or sacred, or we could call it anything. We don't even need a name for it. but that when we really recognize that, not only intellectually, but we feel it and we let it in, like we let it deep into our bones, that's where like true resolution of wounds that you could talk about all day. But once we get to a certain point of recognizing, oh, I can resolve the sense of separation, which is even feeling separate from what happened to us and kind of pulling it close. I like my favorite phrase this month has been, let's snuggle with that. Like, let's pull it. I have two little kids too, so we snuggle a lot. But like, let's pull that kind of old story that feels painful every time we visit it, every time the partner yells or whatever it is. It's all the same stuff, or it's so many similar stories, right? But every time that happens and it triggers in your body, mind, or whatever you want to call it, we get to kind of notice it and pull it close and observe it and snuggle it and get to know it to a depth and a degree of intimacy that does the healing. So it's not even like we heal by doing something. We kind of just allow that sense of deep commitment to be with it, and that is what heals.
People around me would not really accept as something normal. It is totally natural, but it's not
Yeah.
normal in some societies, especially the ones that the way it is now, the structures here. So you can't really all of a sudden, in the middle of a conversation, kind of stop and come from that place of the heart of sacredness and be in silence.
Yeah.
A lot of times you can't do that. And kind of like you said, it's painful for the body mind a lot of times not to be able to express, the divine being at all times, and we have to select, certain moments to be in that space.
Do you have to pick and choose it, or is there an option to let it flow through all the time?
I think especially dealing with practical things, let's say making lists, not food, not eating, because I don't really give a lot of attention to that, whatever
Mm,
I eat. But there's something about planning business, for example. If we,
mm,
and then I have a team, and sometimes I have to talk to them in the sense of structure, payments and negotiations, and that doesn't. And I try to bring this, this presence. I mean, I do. I laugh, and I'm very playful with everything, but
mm,
it's still, it feels like a little restricting, a little stiff, that
mm,
I cannot
mm.
really move freely and be natural. But I don't know, that might be something that would be a life of a monk, right? That will be in a line, full alignment with that divine being. They are always meditating, having conversations about the way we are having now, and that's all they do, day in, day out.
And they have lay people visit often, and so they're confronted with a lot too. And it's a challenge, it's a real challenge, yeah. And because I sense in you, well, I suspect that you're doing a very good job with balancing bringing your heart into the business, and working with the team and kind of managing through the struggles. I was in tech for a decade, or a little over a decade, and I managed teams and projects and things, and so I do understand that type of responsibility and expectations and kind of seriousness. There's like a gravity to it, especially when it's time boxed. If we have to, it's like, oh, and we get kind of pulled more easily into the gravity of the thoughts and the planning mind. But that also is divine, And so there's this kind of opening as we awaken more and more. It's like a recognition of, oh, even when I fall into getting frustrated, that's still divine expression. It's only the part of us that resists it and says, "No, it shouldn't look that way," that keeps us fractured, versus welcoming it and going, "Yeah, maybe I didn't love that I did that, or maybe they really it made them hurt in some way, and that can feel painful. It's still okay though. Like that is simply what it is to be in a world of duality and kicking ass, right? Doing a lot of things. And I do like to, so I occasionally drop F bombs or swear words. I think it's like, that is divine too. We don't need to box ourselves into this restrictive, it's supposed to look this way. No, it gets to look how it looks. And I think the more we can kind of open to that, the more we can really have what these beautiful spiritual teachings of all of these traditions are really pointing us to, which is truly the perfection of the moment we're in, of letting our life lead and not resisting it, not judging it. that recognition of, I remember way back in the day when I was racing bikes and I got a sponsorship through a yoga studio. It was the first time I ever did yoga, and they put us in Shavasana at the very end. And I'd forgotten I never really learned how to meditate. I never had anyone kind of talking about that. And as I dropped into Shavasana, it's so easily, I was like, oh, my mind doesn't stop, and I could kind of fall back and just witness the mind. And I remember the yoga teacher saying, "You're perfect just as you are." And I was like, oh, it was this huge revelation and because I could hear it from the sacred mind. I could hear it from the consciousness, not the thinking mind that would always say, no, but, always has a no, but the sacred mind goes, oh, right. And we get to kind of bubble that up and reinform the ego from that place that says, hey, you're okay. It's like, shh, 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 shh.
Yes, yeah, Patty.
Yeah.
What's not to love about your expression in this reality, Lindsey? Thank you so much. Yeah, it's
Mm.
beautiful.
Yeah, same to you. Oh, it's such an honor getting to talk with you.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. Yes, and that's, well, I mean, it would be so much fun, right? If we could have these conversations everywhere, in the supermarket, everywhere. Go to the gym and just talk
Yeah.
about these things.
Absolutely, and that's where, the kind of, concept that inspired me to kind of when you were like, "What do you wanna talk about in the podcast?" And I was like, "Awakening." Like, I really wanna talk directly about that because I think many of us are ready for that, and we might call it different words, and so it's like the challenge of language being the translation tool makes it a little sticky, but we can get through that because really what matters more is our presence. When we walk through that grocery store with an open heart that says, "Hi, see you. Hi." We don't even need to say any words, right? There's already a conversation happening. And so that's where I'm so drawn now to help people open to recognize how awake they already are. They just have forgotten and are attending to the thoughts more than the wakeful presence of them, you know? And so just like you, I also would love for that to become the norm, and it's not yet, but I think it's coming, and I think you play a really critical role in helping bring that to be. And so I really, I'm grateful for the work that you do.
I guess it's for the experience here. If we really, I mean, it would be a lot more fun, as I always say, meaningful, spiritual fun, beautiful, divine fun, sacred fun. If we could recognize that we're already sacred, then everything would change. But it's not really a doing thing. That's the interesting. It sounds like a paradox, but it's not a paradox either. I don't know what to say. It's a mistake, isn't it, to think that we are not there already?
Yeah, and even mistake holds a little judgment in it. So it's not, I would call it when the intellect or ego is trying to interpret it, it feels like a paradox to solve. When the awareness of you is just being with it, it's aware of paradox, and it just is a thing. And therefore, it's just no problem. The sense of it being a problem kind of poofs away. And it doesn't mean that life isn't challenging. It's just that it's no longer a problem. We just kind of move with it.
I love that. There's
Yeah.
no problem, just a challenge, a dance, another dance.
Sure is. It's a tricky dance with so many steps that we get to learn.
Right, 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 right. And I love the way you have structured, in a way, the steps, to that dance. And I talk to so many people who have different steps to present and how to do, but it's the same dance. So
Yeah.
that's wonderful. So I didn't mention the title of this episode is question. I think I didn't. Yeah, I left as a question. Is humankind devolving into hatred or evolving into awakening? So that's the title. And to end the conversation today, I would like for you to answer that question. I think you already did, and I
Oh,
have
we
this.
did. Yeah, well, and the answer to that question is like yes, because it could really be either. I just find it more fun to focus on the latter, that we're evolving. And of course, there is reasonable experiential data that says we're devolving. But if we're evolving, or if we're recognizing that there is always an option to just be where we are, then that is the evolution, right? It's this natural state. So from a personal scale, I guess I'd pull it back from all of humanity, and just from my personal view, I'm just a regular person who followed no spiritual teachings, and I'm finding myself in a very awake state. and I'm willing to say it now because it's been with me for so long and it feels so freeing that I'm like, why don't we talk about it? Because I know how we're wired. If we're willing to look at it and name it, we get to have more of it. We get to actually be with it and kind of embody it, and so as an intuitive healer, I don't even know if I'm gonna call myself that for much longer. It's really more of a spiritual teacher, I guess, where I'm drawn to invite people to remember their wakeful state. And we could do this in so many different ways, depending on where someone's at in their life and their kind of constraints and belief systems they've carried with them and all of this. But it's right here. And it's not hard to do when someone's really willing to commit to their own well-being and their own sense of deep and utter freedom to be who they are, where they are.
Yes, beautiful, Lindsey. Thank you so much again.
Yeah, you're so welcome.
So before I say goodbye, I want to mention your services. You do offer one-on-one sessions, right? Is that something that
I do. Yeah, they've been pretty full for a couple of years, and so their scheduling can take a little bit. But if people are willing to be patient and they really want to work with me, we always find the time. And then if I don't have one-on-one space available immediately, I can kind of pull you into groups, and so we could do group work and exploration together. And this is a mix of meditation work, mindfulness training, intuitive energy awareness, and then just really like cognitive behavioral awareness of how our thoughts and body work together. And so essentially like using the lens of neuroscience and neurobiology to allow more parts of you to kind of communicate together. And again, that's really where the healing happens, is this deep willingness to allow more of yourself to be known to all of yourself, right? To not hide from any of it. Yeah.
So yeah, I have the website here, so lindseycluin.com. I have your YouTube link as well. Everything will be clickable. So is there anything that you left unsaid, Lindsey, for this conversation?
No, I've so enjoyed this, and I'm
Me too.
hopeful to talk with you again soon.
Yes, we'll meet again. Thank you so much for being you. Thank you. We'll talk soon. Bye for
Thank you.
now, Lindsey.